We have a special guest panelist who graciously joined us after the invitations went out that you saw, so we will be introducing her as well. I'm going to begin with State Senator Jim Bell, who for many of you needs no introduction, but for those of you who do not know State Senator Jim Bell, he's spent 3 decades in public service, beginning with the San Jose City Council, the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, the State Assembly, and was elected to the State Senate in 2012. Jim Bell was instrumental in the passage of AB 12, which extended foster care in California beyond age 18 to age 21. And he is pretty much the man in the state capitol on these issues. Also issues for disabled folks and health issues of all types. So we are going to start with you, Senator Bell, to speak for a few minutes. Sure, come on up.
I've been standing for a long time. I've been in a car all the way down here from Sacramento. 4.5-hour budget hearing today. I just want to thank you all for being here, and thank you, Karen and Di, for the wonderful movie. Today we're discussing a slice of the foster care system, and that's the over-medication and use of psychotropic drugs in foster youth. And you heard from Karen about my work. I suppose it started when I was a member of the County Board of Supervisors, and I just dived in. And right in this building over here, a young woman came up to me who was on our youth council and told me that she was going to be out of the foster care system when she turned 18, and I asked her why was that, and she says, well, the foster care system is ended for us at age 18. And I said, well, what do you plan on doing? She says, well, I don't know. I'm 18, you know. And so that's what motivated me to author AB 12, to extend the age to 21. And that bill was part of many different bills that dealt with foster youth issues. It got me started in a big way on this issue. And last November, you saw the people that we have to face, right? So what we did in the Senate is essentially we've got a collective, we're kind of like a collective group of senators. And we formed a kind of a coalition of senators that wants to get information and requested we took action to get data from the State Department of Healthcare Services about the use of psychotropic meds for foster youth, so we can really understand the depth of the problem. And the information is essential. You know, how do you know what's going on until you get the information? So we identified group homes with high rates of over-medicating foster youth to justify some corrections and some corrective actions. On Tuesday, the Department of Healthcare Services was supposed to release the data we requested, and I'm disgusted because we didn't get the information. They gave us the runaround, and they have yet to release the data we fully requested. So you can see the kinds of things I'm dealing with. I'm a legislator. I have to pass laws and monitor and oversight these programs, and if I don't get the information, how can I do that? The department's refusal highlights the need for legislation. So what we're doing now is we did learn from the release of the data that we have that more than half the children in group homes are medicated with one or more psychotropic medications. We got some information, we did learn that. And another one was 65% of children living in group homes are prescribed medication and given an antipsychotic. 61% are given antidepressants. Hundreds of children living in group homes are given multiple medications long-term. Particularly, we have 108 children that were prescribed 2 antipsychotics simultaneously for more than 2 months. And now I realize there's some cases that warrant these drugs, but the state must ensure that powerful drugs do not replace other effective means of treatment. The drug should only be the final alternative after treatment options have been exhausted. And I've introduced 2 bills. There's actually 5 bills that are now pending through the state legislature from the group of senators, which includes Senator Bill Monning, Senator Holly Mitchell, and others. We have several. We're kind of like circling the wagons, because we're gonna have to fight, folks. SB 319 utilizes public health nurses. You saw the public health nurse, right, in the movie? There are great resources within the child welfare system, and we want the public health nurses to oversee the medical monitoring of foster youth in psychotropic drug use. Do you think that's a good idea? Public health nurses? Yes. And the bill also mandates psychotropic drugs to be recorded on all foster youth health passports so that as they move around, you saw they move around like many different places, so that as a foster kid moves, medical history and psychotropic drug use could also move with them to provide the health professionals with access to important information. Now, the other bill, SB 44, was also introduced. We're, by the way, hearing these bills in 2 weeks. Bills basically establish treatment protocols and institutes oversight measures on group homes. I think this one's going to be the hardest one, don't you? In its goal to flag group homes that rely on psychotropic medications as a frontline or only treatment, in other words, to control the kids. The bill will require those that have the highest rate of medication to reduce those rates and adopt alternative, less invasive treatment approaches. They would have to submit corrective actions and have their implementation of those monitored. This bill also calls for convening all stakeholders to participate in the development of performance standards and outcome measures to reduce the use of drugs. The use of widespread drugging in our foster youth into compliance is a disturbing issue, and it's caught the attention of our Senate. I mentioned Senator Mitchell and Senator Monning. We're tackling the problem from different directions. And we are proposing a package to address the use of psychotropic medications. When nearly 1 in 4 children in foster care and 50% of children have psychotropic medications in the foster care group homes, without adequate oversight, we should all be concerned. It's shameful, and the only positive outcome is to move forward, fix the system so that no reckless foster care group home can ever again drug a child into compliance. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Bell. So I want to let you, we're just going to try to let everyone make brief statements and then ask, but you'll be the first question. Our next very special guest is Sade Daniels, and Sade was in our film. She was the first former foster youth who Di and I interviewed and filmed, and she's a very remarkable young person. She has a degree in social work, and she's applying now to graduate programs in social work. She is a member of the California Youth Connection, which is a very influential group in the state capitol for foster youth. She is an on-site residential advisor for young people who are transitioning out of foster care. I'm not done. She consults with the Youth Law Center, a very prominent national organization based in San Francisco. She also consults with an organization working with sexually exploited youth. She's starting her own business and is a motivational speaker. She's a poet. She does spoken word, and we're very, very pleased to have her tonight. Sade.
A few days ago, I spoke at the Foster Youth Education Summit, and at the end of my address, I spoke about themes regarding love and happiness and joy. Interestingly enough, after I was done speaking, I was able to connect with other foster youth, and we talked about how we didn't really know much about those themes. However, afterwards, we talked about medication we had been prescribed while in care, and the names of trazodone, lithium, Prozac, and a myriad of others flew from our mouth as if it was the alphabet. We knew medication. We knew diagnosis. We knew all those things way more than we knew anything about love, about joy, or about anything regarding a better life. We weren't like other kids, and in many ways, we felt remotely inhuman. The misuse and overuse of psychotropic medication on foster youth aids in these feelings of inadequacy and dehumanization, as well as the myriad of physical side effects of these heavy drugs, both long-term and short-term. It was prescribed parenting where medication was used for behavioral modification, crisis management, emotional distress, in place of a caring adult, basically, who understood the full scope of what trauma looks like and effective treatment methods. This isn't a new issue, rather one that we're finally getting around to talking about. Now, as a service provider, no longer a child, I'm a grown woman, I've met countless youth, from young tweens to young adults, many of whom have struggled with issues attached to being heavily medicated for years, struggle with diagnoses that have lifetime implications. We owe our system-dependent children so much more than what they've gotten. This series is merely the first step. This conversation is a critical one. We have an opportunity to right a detrimental wrong and create better practices that will support our foster youth, not hinder their growth. I'll leave you with an excerpt from a novel that I've been writing. It is, and excuse the one cuss word that's within it. I apologize for it in advance. My edge been off for 2 weeks. I've been edgeless for 2 weeks. That MD done stole my damn edge. That medicine don't work. Life still ain't shit. But the edge is gone. Lithium and trazodone, both of them. I've been in a daze for 2 weeks. Everybody here is, though. It ain't just me. We all been psychotropic zombieing it up for the past 2 weeks. Damn, my head hurts hella bad. I wonder if they got medication for headaches. They got something for everything else. You feeling sad? Here's a pill. You hungry? Here's a pill. You hyper? Here's a pill. You smart? Here's a pill. You miss your mom? Here's a pill. You need a hug? Here's a pill. I wonder if this is curing our problems, because I still feel pretty shitty and dizzy. Thank you.
You're gonna publish that, right?
You can see now why we were so inspired. Our next very special panelist is not so much out there in the public, but she offers a very important voice tonight to this evening, and she's a foster parent. She's been a foster parent for Santa Clara County for 20 years. She's cared for 19, mainly teenagers. She is someone that I actually met through another reporter, and she came to us. I was struck in speaking with her how deeply she cares for the children and how effective she has been helping the children find ways to heal. that do not rely on pharmaceuticals. She recognizes that sometimes they're needed, but she's also has some really important advice to offer other folks tonight. And so we're so glad to have Gail Young here. Thank you.
Well, I'm nervous. I don't do this. But I do want to say something that is a little bit off the subject, and that is that through my years of being a foster parent, I have met very, very many social workers. I have worked with social services for quite a while and know a lot of them, even when they were very small in Gilroy. And I have to say, we're all on the same page as far as wanting to help, wanting to make a difference, wanting to be there for these children. And we do the best we can. So the social workers don't hand out the pills. They try to stabilize the child in a home that will care for them. And that's what they're looking for, and they do whatever they can to help this child. What I have found, though, is that a lot of the kids did come with bags of pills. And I also found that they come with a wraparound team when they have a bag of pills. And after a short time with this wraparound teams, Unity Care, Seneca, Rebecca's, EMQ, there's so many out there. And these teams listen. They hear what the kids have to say. They feel the pain that these kids go in. And not only that, but the advocates are right there. It's hard to get an advocate because that's volunteer work. But once they get one, the advocate usually follows them through. I have many children in my home. They're all older kids. I take high-risk teens, but sometimes I get a young one once in a great while, and until they can place them in a permanent home. None of the children in my home have medication. Some do want to take vitamins, but and they get headaches. But as far as the medication, no, not the medication you're talking about. And they all have a wraparound team, every one of them. Even the 25-year-old has a advocate, and the 27-year-old has an advocate. These are children that before AB 12 kicked in, lived in my home. And it is their home, as long as they go to college. I have a little bit of say, but these kids are survivors. They go through so much. Their families are so important to them. And when they're first taken from their family, they feel as though somebody somewhere did something wrong. What's wrong with my family? To reunite them, to bring them back together is the greatest thing, and I started that from day one because I come from a very strong family. I find that the wraparound teams are very strong as far as finding ways of uniting them. They have a program, Family to Family, and that has helped so many of the children, so many of the teens. I take only the high-risk teens, and that's because I find that a lot of them they've been through 19 homes, some of them, and when they come to me, it's time to sit down. It's time to just figure out what works. What do you need? What can I do for you? And how can I help? And this is basically what a lot of foster parents feel and go through and try. And I know a lot of them. And so foster care has definitely label over it. I hate the name. We go out, and I have so many different nationalities in my home, and people, are all these kids yours? And I have 8 to 10 of them with me. Yeah. Oh, you do foster care, don't you? And they stand and they look, and they go, yeah, okay, so what? We're a family. And no, it doesn't always work out. There's some that they're very angry. And sometimes it's more than what I can do for them. And so they need other help than a home. And that's a heartbreaking situation. Being a foster parent is extremely difficult. You give up so much of what little things are important. Your home cannot be important, believe me. You get holes in the walls, you get things torn up, you get the rugs torn up, but they're replaceable, and these kids are not. And we need help. We need people like this gentleman right here. We're very lucky to have someone finally stand up and say enough is enough. And this young lady just totally impresses me. And I'm just in awe of all the different teens that are standing up and young adults that are saying, no, this is all wrong. This is wrong. And there's got to be another way. And the other way is to listen, hear them, and care what they're saying, and understand what they feel. And I'm hoping so many more people will watch this film and make it mandatory. If you want to be a foster parent, you need to be educated. You need to see this film. You need to be educated on the pills that come into your home. And that's one of the things we do in the house is if they come in with a bag of pills, we sit down at the computer, thank goodness for computers, and we look up the pills and we look up the side effects, and I look at them and I go, whoa, okay, what can we do to kind of change things in your life? And the therapist works with us, the psychiatrist works with us. We don't just take them off the pill because that's not a good idea, but we filter it down until we can work with them and they don't need that bag of pills anymore. So what it's going to take is everybody. It's going to take everybody to get on board. And when you go to those meetings, take this film with you. Have them watch that film. I thank you, Karen, very much for inviting me. I hope people will understand it's just not one group of people that are pushing pills. It's just people are really not sure what direction to go in. And social services is starting to make those changes too. I hear them talking, I see it working, and some of the kids that I know are already off. And that's only because you came forward.
Thank you, Gail. Our next panelist is Dr. Saul Wasserman. Dr. Wasserman has treated foster children in a variety of settings since 1975, including an inpatient adolescent unit and his current post with Catholic Charities Refugee Foster Care Program, many jobs in between. He is the co-chair of the Government Affairs Committee for Northern California of the California Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry, so he represents his colleagues. He served for 20 years on the county's multidisciplinary, I believe it's the Child Abuse Council, is that correct? Child Abuse Team, okay. He's also the author of a book on the treatment of seriously abused children called Healing the Heart. Please welcome Dr. Saul Wasserman.
Thank you. I noticed that Lincoln Center, which had done this great work with this young lady, has closed. I don't know why Lincoln Center closed, but I'd be very curious to know. So I don't want to be in the position of defending what I consider to be poor psychiatric practice. In my mind, the decision to use any kind of medication on a child comes from balancing out the risks and benefits of the medication versus the risks and benefits of not medicating the child. That's number one. Number two is that it's really preferable, if it's at all possible, to use behavioral and therapeutic interventions with a child. That's the place to start in terms of working with a situation. So let's imagine that tomorrow we stop giving psychiatric meds to a population of unhappy, angry, sad, irritable, depressed, anxious, lonely foster children. So what would happen? Some would do okay. They'd probably do better off the medication. An unknown but significant number would punch holes in the walls of group homes, break windows, hit staff, get kicked out of school. Some would be moved to another placement, and some would wind up in juvenile hall, and some would hit the streets. Now, how many kids wind up going from the foster system into the juvenile justice system? In LA last year, the figure was about 600, roughly speaking. If LA has a third of the children in the state, roughly speaking, that means that 1,800 children a year are moving from the foster care system into the juvenile justice system. And I would contend that the prognosis for those kids that are in the juvenile justice system is pretty bad. So if I can keep a child out of the juvenile justice system and help them survive in a foster home, I really feel like I've done a good thing. Now, so what do we need to do? Because we're not happy about the overuse of these medications. Well, there actually is a very good place to start, I think, which was a report that was prepared by the joint oversight hearing of the Assembly Human Services Committee and Select Committee on Foster Care in June of 2011, chaired by James Bell. And there are a lot of interesting recommendations in that report. I guess my view would be, there are a lot of things that we could do. We need to improve crisis intervention services for foster children. You know, when the Great Recession happened, the counties really cut back on their crisis intervention services for children. They've recently been restored in Santa Clara County, but many counties don't have them. We changed the foster care system so that children were dealing with far fewer social workers and far fewer therapists. Because after your fifth therapist, I think you get tired of telling your life story. We'd have better screening and training for foster parents. If children were in group home, we'd have an individualized treatment plan for each child, which would really mean treatment. I'd like to quote what this report said, if I can find it here. Basically, treatment nowadays represents in a group home have an orderly, structured, predictable environment, and occasionally something that vaguely looks like group therapy. There's nothing individual for each child in that approach, and it's not what I would consider to be treatment. I would have a doctor, a psychiatrist who saw a child. When that child came in to see them, that child would have a record, and I would know, why was this medication given? What was the effect of the medication? Has the child been monitored for side effects for the medication? What is the effect on functioning in school? What is the effect on functioning in the group home? So that I could make intelligent decisions about what to do. It's really very hard when a child comes into an office and you just said, this kid punched out a wall in a foster home and the foster parent is at their wit's end. If you don't do something, this child is going to lose the placement. I mean, I don't like being in that situation. I'd like to see children have a meaningful judicial hearing. I know the people that do the reviews in LA and in San Francisco, and they are not happy about the number of meds that some of these kids are under. They would like to see improvements in the system. I would like to see ongoing monitoring for benefits, side effects, with input from the youth, the foster parent, the school staff, anybody that's dealing with the child. And I'd also like to see people being willing to tolerate the risk that's involved in reducing a child's medications while they're in treatment. Because there are many times I've said, well, okay, let's see, what would be a good time to see if we can reduce these meds? And maybe it's over the summer when the child's not in school. It's not going to be just before the family goes on vacation. But periodically, I think a good doctor needs to challenge the assumption that these medications are needed on an ongoing basis. But there's a risk element in that because it could mean that a window gets broken. Now, really what I'd like to see is major reforms in the foster care system, because in my view, that doctor who's told, you've got to do something because otherwise this kid's going to blow out of their placement, is really trying to make the best of a bad situation. Contrary to what the film suggested, I don't think most of them are doing it for the money, truthfully, because really they can make more money in private practice. I think the recommendations were for improved WRAP services, more support for foster parents. If KDS were implemented, how many of you know what KDS is? KDS was a major court decision that came out of LA that said, if you're going to take a child in care and be their parent, you have a responsibility to assess the child's mental health needs and respond to them. Well, how long has it been since KDS was resolved? I think it was resolved in 2012. Counties are still dragging their feet at really what's involved in screening these kids and developing meaningful mental health services for them. So I would love to take these kids off meds, but I think that that implies a responsibility to improve and implement some of the reforms that were talked about in the foster care system. Otherwise, my fear is we run the risk of making things worse rather than better.
Our next speaker is a person who's very important on this issue right now in the state of California. Anna Johnson is a health policy analyst at the National Center for Youth Law. She has a master's from the Goldman School of Public Policy at UC Berkeley, and she got a very interesting perspective working in the Oakland and Philadelphia public school systems as a teacher for 6 years. Anna has been working for 3 years now on this issue. She is an important source right now to the state legislature in the crafting of, I believe, 4 of the 5 bills. She is the one fighting very hard with the state senator to acquire additional data. We, by the way, fought for 9 months to get pretty minimally serviceable data. So that's been an ongoing battle even for these folks here. Anna will tell you today about the legislation that is moving quickly forward.
I didn't realize I was this tall. Okay. Well, so I'm here to talk about what any one of us could actually do about this issue, what a teacher or a friend, a senator, a former foster youth, a judge, a doctor, a nurse, a parent, what can we do about this issue? There's a lot of things we can do. Most of our efforts right now are to reduce inappropriate prescription of drugs that are harmful to children, the things that have no evidence behind them. And the other thing that we want to do is to encourage the ability for foster children to access other services that they want, that they feel are healing, that they feel are therapeutic. And so we're doing that in a few ways. The 4 bills that I'm working on with Senator Bell, the first bill that I want to talk about actually deals with the big problem that we heard all of the foster youth talk about, the gaining of weight, the development of breasts for boys, the headaches that don't go away, the tremors that become lifelong. Those are side effects that sometimes when caught earlier on don't become a long-term disability. And so our bill, SB 319, is all about monitoring for children that are on a medication, whether they've decided, yes, I want to be on that drug or not. They deserve to have a follow-up appointment, to have somebody paying attention to see, is that safe for them? Is it still safe for them 3 weeks later, 3 months later, or do they need to change that treatment? So that bill we would really like your support with, and that's being authored by Senator Bell. Another bill that we're working on deals with another huge issue we heard in this film, which is that children in group homes are the most medicated of all foster children, of all children in our state, actually. So they're medicated not just with one drug, multiple drugs, long-term, sometimes their whole time in that system. And a lot of times we hear, well, this is going to stabilize their placement. But if you counted the number of placements, starting with the time they got their first drug, that argument does not match up. I've looked at case file after case file, treatment plan after treatment plan of children, and I don't see it. I don't see they started a kid on a pill, and that pill made the difference in that placement. No, people make the difference. Services that are healing make the difference. Pills don't keep kids out of jail. They don't keep kids in school. People do. Encouragement does. Healing does. So SB 484, what that is really about is about looking at those group homes that are inappropriately prescribing drugs and not giving those alternative treatments, identifying them, working with them to improve their practices, and having a way to actually do that, getting the data from the state, which they do not want to give to us. And Senator Bell is also making that happen. So please, in any way that you can find to support that, please support that bill. There's 2 other bills I want to talk about. One is about our court process. Right now, a court judge has to make the decision if a child can be medicated with psychotropics. Those judges don't have training unless their county has chosen to do so voluntarily. They might have been on the bench for a day or 2 years, but oftentimes change over and don't know a lot about that decision. So we're giving them guidance in how to make those decisions, making sure they have the information that they need in order to say, do these benefits to the child outweigh the risks? And making sure that that judge has a hearing set with more information to see, do we continue this process with this child? So that bill, again, please support that, is SB 253. Senator Monning is the author of that bill. And finally, there's a bill about data, training, and the court process. What we've heard from our foster parents and other professionals is that we don't know about this decision, that we don't know about these medications, and we want to make sure that a caregiver who sees a child gaining weight knows to call the doctor and go change that, right? That if they see a teacher sees a child drooling in class, that they've been trained to know, okay, that's actually not correct. Maybe we need to change the dosage, or maybe we need to change treatments entirely. But just that training that triggers the information, the knowledge of who to call. We don't currently have that in society, and we need it, and that bill would do that. And that's SB 238. I have packets out on the table out there. I only brought 50 because I like trees. I think you do too in San Jose and in this area. But I also have my card. If you'd like to support the bills, we have them up on the website, sample letters of support. We need your help. April 14th is our hearing, and we need letters of support by April 5th so we can turn them into the committees. But we know this is a first start. We're actually planning another series of bills for next year that are going to help to encourage funding into those alternative services, to reduce pharmaceutical pressures on docs and on communities to use drugs that are not tested on children. And so this is sort of the first step in work that we're doing to really change this practice and to make it safer for foster kids. And we would love your support. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more speaker who I'm really pleased could join us tonight. As Anna mentioned, California is unique in the nation in that a juvenile court judge has to authorize all psychotropic prescriptions for children who are dependents of the court. We're pleased to have Judge Catherine Lucero with us tonight. She is a former DA who's been 15 years on the Superior Court, but she specializes in children and family issues in the courts. She was spent 6 years on the juvenile dependency bench as a supervising judge and is now on the juvenile justice court again, and she has recently started a dual diagnosis court for youth involved in the criminal justice system who are using drugs and have a mental health diagnosis. Judge Lucero is someone who is always looking to improve the practices of the juvenile court and always looking for systemic changes. And I had the great pleasure of meeting her 7 or 8 years ago when the Mercury News took an in-depth look at the juvenile courts in California. And Judge Lucero was a rare voice on the bench that allowed us to observe otherwise confidential hearings. And we came to special agreements to keep the children's and the parents' identities private, but it was a very important experience for our series. So I have been very honored to know Judge Lucero over many years, and I'm really glad she's here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you, Karen, for inviting me, and thank you to all of you for showing up tonight to really kind of speak out with your presence about how important this issue is to you. As was mentioned, each of the California counties, there are 58 of us, handle this differently in our jurisdictions with regard to how judges, the protocols. In our county, Judge Shauna Schwarz was designated in 2008 to be the go-to judge for signing off on psychotropic medication for foster youth. She received in-depth training because we realized that the different orders shouldn't be going through any random judge, that it should be a judge who has some understanding of the side effects of psychotropic medication, of the age recommendations, and in depth she was trained on that. She still handles that, and she has developed relationships with many of our agencies so that the requests are processed timely. Sometimes there's urgent needs for things, whether it's to go off medication, go on medication, and so she has been in charge of the juvenile court bench to do that. I want to just mention, though, that for a moment that there's a lot of reform needed in the foster care system, and the psychotropic medication angle is really one of them. And what I was struck by in this film was why the CASA had to find the mom. Why I personally don't think under most circumstances, because there are certainly always exceptions, I don't think that we should separate children from families. I think that if there can be a safe alternative to keeping a child home, that's what we should do. So, you know how we were saying medication is a last resort, taking a child from their family is a last resort. So I just want to kind of put that out there. And if we have to take a child from their family, keeping them connected somehow to their family is so important. Especially when kids become teenagers, what I saw over and over again was kids running away to their families. I saw kids going home to their families as soon as they could. So there's a lot of alternatives to medicating, and as Dr. Ardondo said, how do you fix a broken heart? I think that we need to develop reimbursable mental health alternatives other than psychotropic medication, like meditation practices, tapping therapy, wilderness therapy, other self-regulation techniques. I call that the slow work of loving. Okay, it's quick to give someone a pill. One of the things that I have to deal with when I was in juvenile dependency court was this idea that you could quickly raise a child, that's what the whole kind of physical abuse thing is about, right? Well, you don't slap a child, you explain to a child that there's something that didn't work. So how do we have a system of justice that responds to these kids, that takes into consideration that what we're really trying to heal is a spirit, and that what we're really trying to heal is a fractured concept of what it's like to be on this planet in society and learn how to trust. That's slow work. It takes intentionality, and it takes attention. And I think that we shouldn't even have group homes. So, I kind of think big in my vision here. Instead of having a group home, I think that we should train more professional parents. We have a lot of really great families that will take in children, but families need training on how to do that. And we need to put money into that. And we need to figure out respite care. If you really want to stop the unnecessary onslaught of chemical restraint, that's a very, I heard that tonight, and I really heard it. That's a really shameful practice. We need to support human beings in connecting with one another. That's what we need to put our dollars behind. So I think that what I really just wanted to say tonight is I'm so glad that our foster youth are here telling us what we need to hear. I'm so uncomfortable being part of a system that is promoting these practices. I can tell you that Santa Clara County is below average in its psychotropic medication of children. It said 22 statewide. We're below that. We're putting ourselves anywhere between 8 to 15%. But we are crunching the numbers because the numbers right now are coming from different sources. We have child welfare sources, we have the judiciary sources, we have state sources. So we're looking more closely at those numbers. But I want to remind all of us that when we take a child from a family, that's a very invasive state action. And the response needs to be equally extraordinary by the state. And so I support, of course, the reforms that our senator is making. He's always been a champion for foster youth. But he needs good ideas, you guys. And he listens, and then he makes it happen. So there's a lot of creativity in this room, I can tell. I've seen many of you at other gatherings. I know you care deeply about our children, as I do. But we have to understand the state is not a good parent, and whenever you have too many agencies involved and too many bureaucracies and too many forms, then guess who falls through the cracks? It's a child. So thank you for letting me speak, and I will stick around for questions.
Okay, well, I've already promised the first question. I'm just going to ask that we just keep the questions pretty brief, we'll keep the answers brief as we can so that we can get as many of them in as possible. So I'm going to, while Martin is getting the mic ready, I just want to acknowledge the presence of Andre Chapman, who is the head of Unity Care Group Homes. Just one moment. And he is showing the film, I believe, to his staff, and he's someone who cares very much about these issues as well. So I promised this woman the first question, so if you want to step to the microphone, and then Andre, if you would like to make some comments, we'd love to hear from you as well.
Yeah, my question is, I'm a San Jose State University student graduating in May with a master's degree. And that will be in social work. So last year, we went to lobby days. I'm sure you're familiar with it. And the question is, it sounded like you were saying you were voting on the 14th, but lobby days isn't until that weekend. So I'm just trying to figure out, and it said info you asked for, taking 2 years to get, and you got the bills to highest rate of medication use, and you are responsible for AB 12. So did AB 12 take 5 years, 10 years? And do we expect to wait this long? Or, what can we expect if you get advocacy from persons like myself and many in the audience? What can we expect regarding these bills?
Thank you.
Well, she wants to know about the process of bills. Well, I'll tell you, AB 12 took about 2.5 years, 13 amendments, and it was amended the last day of the session at 9:30 at night, and the deadline to get the bill passed was midnight. And we had to deal with the governor, actually, Governor Schwarzenegger, because he was threatening to veto the bill right at the last minute. And then we sort of said, okay, go ahead and veto it. And then he ended up signing it. It's kind of like poker, calling his bluff, kind of thing. But the tough thing about bills is when you go through the process, you have to get votes, and you usually have to get about 6 different votes in committees and on the floor of the Senate, and then you go over the Assembly, and that's a total of about 6 different times you have hearings. So there'll be plenty of opportunities in that process to lobby and actively help us get those bills passed. Okay, it'll go through the first committee this next month, and then it'll go to the committee that kills the bills. It's called Appropriations. It's the bill killing committee. And then it'll go over to the Senate floor, and then once the Senate passes, it goes to the Assembly, and they do the same thing. And then it'll go to Jerry Brown, and we have to get Jerry Brown to approve it. So it's a process that sometimes takes a long time. When we adopt a bill, it goes into effect January 1st. So it'll go into effect January 1st, and that's the answer to that question.
Thank you, Senator Bell. Andre, and then, sir, you're next.
Well, first, I just want to say congratulations to this young lady. I think we should stand up and give her a round of applause. Let's stand up. Everybody stand up. And so my name is Andre Chapman. I run an organization called Unity Care that I started 21 years ago. We serve about 5,500 kids in foster care a year. So we have a lot of different programs. I'm sorry, I lost my voice. A lot of different programs. It's a very complicated system. And for me, our whole focus at Unity Care is to prevent kids from coming into foster care. And just like Judge Lucero said, if we were to think about when a child is removed, how traumatic that experience is for that child to be removed. I want to commend Gail, I don't have my glasses on, Gail, for being a foster parent, because we need more folks like Gail that's willing to open their doors and be a person that's going to provide unconditional care to these young folks that come in that are very traumatized by the experience. But let me go back to how we really resolve this problem, because you're right, this is a very complicated problem around medication. But the bigger issue is There are so many kids that should not have come in foster care. The way that we bring kids in to foster care is based upon 80% of kids come in for what's called general neglect. So Jim, here's a bill that we should be pushing. General neglect. That means if a family has an issue around housing or poverty or no food in the refrigerator, those kids end up coming into foster care. And when they come in, they get moved around because they're very traumatized by that process. And it is a very difficult process when you're trying to stabilize a young person who's been traumatized because they've been removed from their family for no apparent reason in their mind. We have to think about how we categorize. The only time a child should be brought into foster care is when they are at risk of abuse, which is different from well-being. Well-being issue doesn't mean it's a bad parent. Well-being issue means that this parent needs support and love and care. We need to wrap that parent to mitigate that child from coming into foster care. And the challenge is that, and here's what we deal with a lot of times at Unity Care. We deal a lot of times with kids that come in and they're 16 and 15 and 16. They've been in foster care since they were 2 years old or a baby. And the parent has lost parental rights. So imagine that, a 17-year-old child who wants to be connected to their mom, who lost parental rights when they were a baby. Well, they don't remember that, but the system says you cannot go back and reconnect. Well, we say, no, you need to go back and reconnect, because that's where these kids end up going. So there's a lot of opportunities to think about how do we mitigate the risk factors and support and wrap those families so these kids don't need to come into care. And we got to find relatives. Family finding used to be a priority across this nation.
Thank
Funding
you.
has been lost.
Thanks.
Okay,
All right. So there's huge, a lot of huge systemic issues that we can talk about. And tonight we're here to talk a bit more about the medication issue.
It's a
Please.
short question. My name is Peter Giritz. Unfortunately, my son died of psychiatric medications. Age 33, 5 years ago. As of today, I'm standing here in front of you. The psychiatrist, the hospital, the emergency room doctors, the pathologist, the medical board, everybody lying. Everybody just denying. Anyway, I have a question to these two ladies. Either one can answer it. This is clearly what I see over there, and I'm reading. Thank you, Ms. Karen, that you wrote this all down. This is clearly a criminal case. My question is, what Ms. Harris, Kamala Harris, is doing with her armada of lawyers, and what is in the future that a medical board, are they stalling? They looking at the psychiatrist? And there are all kinds of laws, all kinds. Why they don't stop this? But this is going on more than a decade.
Okay, thank you, and we offer our condolences for your son.
What are they doing?
Anna, do you want to talk about what Kamala Harris and her new Children's Bureau briefly? And because I've talked to them a bit about this, I don't know that they're focusing on this particular issue, but they are focusing on foster care.
Yeah, the reality is that it's really hard to find the evidence to find a criminal case, but it has been done. It's been done in different states. There have been lawsuits that have happened, and so one of the things that you need to do, essentially, if you see a fraudulent case, you can report to the medical board. They're going to go through their own system of finding that evidence. But what you need to do as anyone that interacts with a patient or a client or goes to the doctor is keep your medical records. That's something that's really hard for foster youth, right? It's not necessarily accurate, it doesn't follow them. But that's one system that exists. But there are also folks like in this audience, Bill Grimm, who has won settlements and lawsuits for children who have experienced the hardship of being put on psychiatric medications. And Bill, I don't know, you can hear about his work in Nevada, but he's here today. So there are good people that can help in those situations where there has been fraudulent prescribing. Kamala Harris just started a foster care task force bureau and has invited people to share their feedback directly with her staff. She's sort of setting out what she wants to do with that bureau. So just reach out to her staff if you have those ideas. We've heard a couple good ideas today. And if you want help connecting with her, I'm happy to give you my card.
Thank you. Who else has a question tonight?
Hello.
Yes.
I want to say thank you for the invitation to see this film. And I also would like to see that Jim Bill, since he is with Campbell Unified District, to bring it in to the schools, to the parents first, and teachers, and then to the other adults. It would be wonderful for elementary parents to see what medication can do to their children and psychiatric treatments and counseling treatments from all ages. If we could take it to the elementary level, then take it to junior high and then to high school, then hopefully by the time it gets to high school, that individual, student, and parent will have the reach, hope of help from the county, state, and federal. Also, according to your AB, you should take that to the schools and see if some of the parents will be willing to sign it, and teachers. You'll get more than us to participate in your petition.
Do you have a question for the panel? Just
Yes, to the gentleman that spoke, it's very wonderful that he said what he said, but I also would like to see it brought into the federal, state, and the county, because that is so true. But we have to unite all the groups in counseling, starting with EMQ, social service, doctors, and the federal and state.
thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
Questions, please. Statements are nice, but questions are better.
We can do both, a little bit of both.
Good evening.
Thank you.
My name is Denise Marshu, and I'm the Executive Director for the Kinship Adoptive and Foster Parent Association. And I have a quick comment, and then I have a question, if
Yes.
that's okay.
Thank you, Denise, for coming.
No, it's my pleasure, and I appreciate everybody up there. I see daily, we see foster parents, relative caregivers, adoptive parents struggling with our children, and as they become young adults and through their teens, and children as young as 4 years old with such heartache and no joy in their life. You talked a little bit about joy in these children's lives. But my biggest problem is that the therapy that's out there for our children is not enough. And what I want to ask is that, is there going to be a change in that? I mean, I know, Gail, you've been very successful with some of the WRAP services with your children, and some of our families are, but there's so many that struggled. Myself, for 8 years, we had in-home therapy for my son, and we still struggle at 20 years old. We went through 12 therapists for him, and every time a child loses a therapist, it's another grief and loss issue that goes through in their life, and the heartbreak again, and starting all over again with trying to get this child healed from all that they've been through. So I'm hoping that there's some answers for that you're all thinking that this is a definite part. Dr. Watson, and you talked about it too, is that this needs to be addressed, is that these children need help, and it needs to be more than a young therapist that comes into your life and then leaves after a few months, or is struggling. I had some come into my life and say, "Oh, you're teaching me so much, Denise." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I don't want to teach you. I need the tools. So the question is there anything that you're going to build into these bills? Jim, I know you and I have talked before, or is there anything else, any other movements going on so that therapeutic services for our children triples, quadruples, whatever is needed to help them?
Sade, did you want to talk about what might be more effective? The funding streams aren't maybe all there
Well, I'm
yet.
not a legislator, but
Any minute now.
if I can speak from my own experience. I recall before I entered foster care, before the last time I entered foster care, living in a homeless shelter, and it was a horrible experience being in the shelter, but I remember one thing they had, which was a children's section. And in that children's section, they had a lot of different programs. People volunteered their time, introduced the youth to yoga, to spoken word, to art, all types of arts, basic things that we had never been exposed to. And via that program, I was introduced to writing. And it took a long time for me to really develop that, but it was the first time that I had a space where I could creatively come out. When I entered foster care, I was immediately put on medication, and during that time I was on medication, I could not write at all. So the writing actually stifled the very thing that was helping me build up my emotional wellness, that was helping me counter the trauma that I was experiencing. And interestingly enough, we have resources there that don't necessarily take a lot of funds. The programs that I was in, such as Youth Speaks, it's free. So it's like, I think that there's a need to continue to gather resources that are already readily available and better integrate and collaborate with these organizations that's already providing therapeutic methods.
Dr. Wasserman, if funding were not a problem, thank you, Sade. If funding were not a problem, what types of therapeutic methods, specifically with foster children, could clinicians employ that would be effective in this population?
I think it depends on the age of the child. I think that for younger children, for a child who's 2 coming into the system, I think these very young children need what we call super nurturance. They need super moms who are willing to be there and find ways of engaging, because we know that by 7 months, a child has formed a bond with a parent, and that parent could be drug using and drop the kid off for 2 weeks with a neighbor and go off and shoot up, and yet that child has already started to connect to that parent. So when you disrupt these early bonds, it's very profound on the developmental state of the child, and there's a real need for extra to help develop the relationship. I think that for teenagers, finding the child's strengths and providing a way that the child can use those strengths, whether it's writing or music or yoga or whatever, is a really important tool. And that, if we look at resilience in children, which is something that our field is very interested in, a lot of it has to do with building on strengths, and a lot of it has to do with developing at least one positive relationship. Those are the 2 key elements in my view. I don't really want to spend a lot of time talking with a child about, tell me how miserable you felt when you were abandoned for the 4th time by your mother. That's not actually going to be constructive, okay? And we know that trauma-based CBT is a very effective technique if you're talking about a single trauma, but many of these kids have had ongoing and repetitive traumatic experiences, and a strength-based and resilience-based approach is, I think, the name of the game.
Thank you very much. I would like to call in, is George Stewart, are you here? Yeah, George Stewart has been very effective for many, many years at the Seneca Center, working with some of the most severely troubled children using non-pharmaceutically reliant approaches. George, do you want to talk a bit about what has been most effective with your kids?
Use a microphone right back to you.
1 second.
Sorry, and then we'll get back to your question, okay?
I think it's important to note that while psychiatric medications are indicated at times and can be helpful, not often in the way they're given multiply or in high doses or for long periods of time, but they only suppress symptoms. And what heals children are relationships, and I think that's where our energy and our money and our thrust have to be towards developing a variety of services that provide enduring, compassionate, loving relationships for kids, whether that be developing a larger pool of foster parents and helping them and training them and supporting them, whether that be having a whole spectrum of crisis services, because often psychiatrists will see foster children when they're in crisis, and they're in a bind. They're said, do something. Well, and there isn't a wraparound service in this particular place I'm working with this child. There aren't services that you can provide other supportive relationships, so you give them a medication, which is it's a very poor substitute for a relationship. Anyway, that's most of what the question I had actually would be for Judge Lucero and Senator Bell, and this is for a foster child to be prescribed medication, the prescribing physician has to fill out something called a JV-220, a form that details the child and the reasons for it and what other services the children's had and what drugs they're being given and what are requested. As you mentioned, Judge Lucero, this is done very differently in different counties. In some places it's done very poorly, I think, or not done at all even, I'm hearing. And I'm wondering if it isn't time for the state to actually take control of this and have, as much as a judge can be trained to do this, they are not physicians, and they haven't had that kind of experience or clinical experience. And it just seems to me that, like certain counties, I know San Francisco County and Contra Costa County have a child psychiatrist who reviews every one of these JV-220s. And it just seems to me that we could develop a pool of those who could do it for Modoc County and places where there aren't child psychiatrists. Wouldn't that be a sensible piece of legislation?
Well, I know LA does that too. They do have a child psychiatrist who reviews every request. And there's certainly pros and cons. Some of these foster youth do have doctors that are in consultation with foster parents, in consultation with social workers, and they're creating a recommendation based on many factors, not just something on paper, not just symptoms on paper. And so the con of that strategy is that then it goes through a second doctor for a review who has never seen the child and has never talked to the foster parent or talked to the social worker. So I think yes, we've discussed that here at the level of Santa Clara County, whether or not we want to go that route. So the county would actually employ a psychiatrist to review every single request. That is one strategy. And so are you asking if Senator Bell should legislate that should happen? Sure. A consultant in case we're like, we don't think this, 5-year-old should be on this bipolar medication or something like that. Absolutely. And I don't even know that really judges should be in charge of this. We're in charge of a lot of stuff that, I went to law school, and that was a long time ago. So again, it goes back to the state as a parent, and the way we've chosen to handle this so far, but I'm open to alternatives in this area.
Anna can talk briefly about the bill right now that would improve the JV-220 court process. He wants you to.
It's the Monning bill.
Okay. Senator Monning's bill is SB 253, which addresses some of the struggles in the court process. One of those pieces is providing a psychiatric consultant to the court so that if the judge or the attorney or the CASA has a question about the treatment decision by the doctor that has seen the child, they have someone who has trained and clinical experience to request more information from. maybe they didn't receive the risks and benefits, maybe they don't know a lot, maybe they don't know where to go for information. That person can do that and can also review to say, okay, there's this choice for 2 antipsychotics. That person would have the authority to call that doc and say, okay, what did you do to arrive upon this decision? And if it all checks out, they can say it all checks out. And if it doesn't, they can give a consultation to the doc as well as a peer-to-peer.
The kicker there is, let me tell you about the real world. It says that you have to, the bill is currently written, it says you have to swear under oath, in effect, that you have reviewed the child's psychiatric record and medical history and medication history. Now, I don't know if you guys realize, but I'm not going to swear under oath to something that I haven't done. And so I'm going to say to the social worker, I can't swear to that. And then the social worker is going to say, but he's got a chart about this thick at DFCS, and I can't plow through that entire chart to get that record. So that's a great concept, and I totally support it, but recognize that it will mean many changes in the way that DFCS deals with children. In my view, mostly for the better, but there are going to be a lot of ripples.
Excellent, thank you. A question in the back, please.
Hi, my name is Elena Renti, and I'm the founder of Choices. It's a mentoring program for foster kids. And I've been listening to everything, and this really isn't pertaining to drugging the kids, although that is a very inappropriate way to handle the foster care system. I've been abandoned, I've been sexually abused, I've been on drugs, I've been through it all. And what got me able to reach these foster kids was I lived the trauma that they lived. And so I've been working with some of the kids at Seneca, and they didn't understand how I was reaching them, and they were coming to my office and meeting with me and making all their appointments, and they weren't able to reach them. And I found out it's because I can relate to their trauma. And the therapists weren't understanding, how is it that they're coming here? Why are they coming? Why do they keep coming to your office? Because I know what they went through. And if you can get a therapist that has experienced what they've experienced, they will listen to them. They will be able to walk them through their trauma. They will be able to relate and help them get through all their pain. So I'm asking everyone I have mentors. I hook them up with mentors that will spend time with them 4 hours out of a week. Find out what that kid's passion is. Find out what it is that they love to do and build from that. Help them through their pain. Help them understand why they're abandoned. It could be because their mother had a mental illness, or maybe their mother had some kind of traumatic experience in their life, why they couldn't take care of them. But make them walk through that pain so that they don't have to continue to act out, continue to self-mutilate themselves or whatever it is, because I've done it all. I've cut my throat. I've done everything. But I make them kids understand that one, they are royalty. They came from God. They're going to return to God, and to learn how to love themselves despite of what what happened to them.
Thank you very much. You must be a very important person in their lives. So it's 8:30. We did promise to be done, but I'm happy to stay. We can not, you gotta go. All right, thank you, see you. All right, I guess, please, just if we can keep it brief.
It'll be short and sweet.
Go for it.
This one's directed at Senator Bell. We're registered nursing students at San Francisco State, and we're going to be taking this information back and teaching our fellow peers. And you kind of touched on SB 319, that nurses have an important role in this new bill. Can you kind of expand upon how we're going to be involved in making that a success?
Well, I think the idea of having, what I'm talking about is the public health nurses that we have at the county to facilitate a lot of the examination and independently review the status of the foster use of medication. So that can be done by a nurse, reported to the foster care system, the social worker, somebody with some medical experience that could give reports and make recommendations. It's a way of of putting a transparency, if you will, in the system, so we have another added way of reviewing by a professional that's working in the medical profession to help the foster youth achieve the right status. And if there's recommendations, I think that's the way to go about it. We have to have more oversight on this, and that's a way of doing it. We have good public health nurse system in this county, and we should have in other counties as well. And public health nurses, folks do a lot of work at home visits. They visit the home. They do a lot of work in the homes where foster youths already are. We can expand that to include this kind of activity. So that's what I'm trying to do. Okay.
Thank you. Would any of the panelists like to make just 30-second closing remarks? Anything missed? Gail, could you just talk extremely briefly about what RAP team looks like?
My allergies really kicking in. Sorry. We have CFTs, which are meetings, sometimes weekly, sometimes every other week. And they come into the home, and we discuss with the child what's working, what's not working, what we need to do to make things better. Then there's maybe 3, 4 that are on the RAP team that would take the child out individually. And each one has something special that they do with them. One might be a therapist that just takes them out and they talk and they walk through the woods or whatever, the parks. Another one is into sports possibly and takes them out to play some sports or bowling or whatever they would enjoy doing. Another one would take them out to eat, especially after school. The kids love that. And so each person focuses on that child, not just as a group, but individually. And they spend time with that child, sometimes an hour, sometimes 2 or 3 hours, depending. And this person the child has a chance to connect. Now, I have a 7-year-old in my home right now who has a RAP team that is just, it's incredible. He's been moved and he's gone through trauma and he's really dealing with a lot in his life. And he's incredible. He laughs, he smiles, he's into sports, he loves it. I have teenagers that have, they're high risk, so of course they come with the drug and the alcohol issues and different things that they're trying to overcome. And the RAP team takes them out, gets them involved with whatever might interest them, horseback riding, swimming. They will take them and do anything that's possible that will help them feel better about themselves and about the surroundings. And then there's the family. And to me, that is so important.
Thank you, Gail. Thanks a lot. Because of the late hour and people needing to go home, any closing remarks from anyone? If not, I just want to thank everyone for this evening and this wonderful, caring, and special panel that came out tonight. Thank you so much.
Yeah, the CYC